Stephanie White, I will always lead with love. Love will always win. Literally 3 seconds later, the rest of you can go to hell.
That contradiction is the whole problem. If your message is love, grace, and kindness, what happens when the very next line is telling your critics they can go to hell?
She made a severe miscalculation believing that some online community is causing some trouble for her when she didn't realize, as she got booed by the fans in attendance, that no, a lot of fans are just unhappy with her.
And notice where this story immediately moved. This stopped being just another argument about one hard foul, one coach's judgment, or one angry corner of social media. The backlash reached the building itself, where Stephanie White was reportedly booed by people who actually bought tickets to watch the Indiana Fever. That distinction matters. Online criticism is easy to dismiss as noise. Paying customers expressing frustration inside your own arena is harder to wave away. But there is an even bigger issue coming, because White's response created a second controversy that may be more damaging than the original one. It involves what she said she saw, what the video appears to show, and why fans believe the explanation simply does not add up.
She did not have Sophie Cunningham's back. She went out there and claimed that she didn't actually see the play happen. Now, video and pictures everywhere are showing her looking directly at the play.
That's where the argument gets complicated. White has said she did not see the play in real time. Critics immediately started circulating still images and footage that they say show her facing the action as Sophie Cunningham was hit. Now, a photograph showing someone's eyes pointed toward the court does not prove exactly what that person processed in a split second. Coaches are tracking substitutions, officials, spacing, players, and the ball simultaneously. That's the fairest possible defense. But once you publicly say you didn't see something, the video becomes evidence that everybody is going to inspect frame by frame. And when fans already believe you failed to defend your own player, even the appearance of inconsistency becomes gasoline. That's the danger White walked into. She wasn't responding to an audience willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. She was responding to an audience already convinced she had been too soft about what happened to Cunningham. So instead of ending the argument, her explanation gave critics a brand new question. If she was positioned right there, what exactly did she miss?
Remember, fans, Stephanie White didn't see the attack on Sophie in real time. There she is standing right there. There she is right there. This was a predictable Stephanie White performance. She needs to resign. The Fever organization needs to make changes now, not later. You guys are amplifying this nonsense.
That reaction gets at something bigger than whether White technically meant every Fever fan when she said go to hell. Coaches sometimes speak emotionally. They get frustrated. They fire back at critics. In isolation, one sharp sentence does not automatically make somebody incapable of coaching. The problem is context. White was trying to make a broader point about compassion and the ugliness surrounding the conversation. Then she ended that thought with the exact kind of hostile language that undermined the tone she had just been advocating. That made the clip almost tailor-made for social media. No complicated explanation is required. People can put the two lines beside each other and say, which one do you actually believe? And this is where the Fever have a problem that has nothing to do with X threads or YouTube. Caitlin Clark changed the scale of attention around this franchise. Every press conference gets clipped. Every possession gets replayed. Every coaching decision gets debated. When your team is operating under that kind of microscope, media discipline is part of the job. You don't have to like that reality. You just have to understand it.
You see, this team gets too, I've said this before, this team gets too much attention for her. Plain and simple. That's why I've said before you needed an NBA coach. Somebody that can handle all the scrutiny that's going to come with being the coach of Caitlin Clark. That it is what it is. Every little thing is going to get broken down.
That's one of the strongest points in the criticism. The Fever are not living under ordinary WNBA scrutiny anymore. Their games, their players, their controversies, and their press conferences travel far beyond the league's traditional audience. That means Stephanie White isn't merely managing 5 players into rotation. She's managing the pressure that comes with one of the most scrutinized teams in women's sports. Now, saying only an NBA coach could handle that pressure goes too far. Plenty of excellent coaches outside the NBA know how to handle a microphone, but the underlying point is legitimate. This particular job demands an unusually high level of composure because seemingly small moments can become national stories by breakfast. And here's where the stakes jump again. Fans aren't just criticizing White's wording, they're beginning to question whether the organization itself agrees with her approach. Once that happens, the conversation moves from one coach's bad press conference to institutional trust.
Seriously, fire Stephanie White. The worst look in the world right now is the Indiana Fever coming out. I mean, at this point, if the Pacers wanted to get rid of Stephanie White, they'd have to fire the president too. The team president backed these comments.
That is the dangerous transition. Calls to fire a coach happen constantly in sports. Lose 3 games, somebody wants the coach fired. Blow a timeout, somebody wants the coach fired. Make a questionable substitution, same thing. Most organizations can ignore that noise. But this backlash is being framed differently. The critics are not saying only, Stephanie White made a bad basketball decision. They're saying, we no longer believe this coach represents or protects the team the way we expect. Whether you agree with that accusation or not, that's a much harder perception problem to repair. And if Fever leadership publicly supports White's broader message, then critics are inevitably going to direct their anger beyond the bench. That's why this story could linger. Firing a coach is one decision. Rebuilding trust between a fan base and an organization is much more difficult. There is also a basic sports principle involved here. Fans want to feel that when one of their players takes a dangerous-looking hit, their coach's first instinct is to defend the player. That doesn't mean demanding suspensions before reviewing video. It doesn't mean declaring another athlete malicious without evidence. It means communicating clearly that player safety matters and that you are going to evaluate what happened. If your audience instead comes away believing you showed more concern about criticism surrounding the incident than about the player involved, you've lost control of the message.
Internet lives forever. Nothing is really deleted. What are you lying? Quote, I didn't see the play in real time. It's a terrible look. Nobody's buying this at all. I didn't see it in real time. Also, Stephanie White, right there, she's getting worked.
And now we arrive at the phrase critics keep returning to. I didn't see the play in real time. This is the part White needed to anticipate. Once that sentence became the foundation of her explanation, every camera angle in the arena became relevant. Fans started posting frames showing her near the sideline looking toward the action. Again, that still does not establish what she mentally registered in that instant. A person can be looking in a direction without clearly seeing the exact point of contact. That needs to be acknowledged. But public communication isn't judged only by what can be technically defended. It's judged by whether the explanation feels credible to the audience hearing it. Imagine the alternative. White could have said she didn't have a clear enough view initially, reviewed the replay afterward, and believed the officials should handle whatever discipline the play warranted. That gives her room without creating an absolute claim people can challenge with a screenshot. Instead, the phrase became a meme. And once your explanation becomes the joke, you've got a communications problem bigger than the original question.
Go to hell. Yeah, that is love, grace, and kindness. Maybe she should follow her projected words. Fact is, she did not stand up for her player.
This is where the conversation should stay grounded, because some of the online reaction went far beyond basketball. There are people trying to turn the incident into sweeping claims about personal identities, political tribes, and the motives of everyone involved. None of that is necessary to evaluate White's performance as a coach. You don't need to speculate about somebody's identity to ask whether a coach handled a press conference badly. You don't need an ideological conspiracy to ask whether she should have defended Cunningham more forcefully. And you definitely don't need to declare another player's motive as fact when intent has not been established. There is already enough on the record. Cunningham was hit. The play drew controversy. White's initial response angered a portion of the fan base. Her later comments about love and kindness ended with a hostile message toward critics. Fans then circulated footage challenging her statement that she did not see the play in real time. That's the actual case, and it's strong enough without adding claims nobody can prove. The fascinating part is that White appears to believe the central issue is an online narrative being constructed around her. Her critics believe exactly the opposite. They believe the videos and quotes are the narrative. That difference explains why neither side is hearing the other.
Grace, humility, and kindness will win. Now go to hell. She's a complete joke. How many times can you use didn't see the play in real time?
There it is again. Grace, humility, kindness, followed by the language fans immediately weaponized against her. Now look at this from White's side for a moment. Coaches and players live inside an online environment that can be vicious. A legitimate criticism can become personal abuse in seconds. People can flood mentions, attack families, question character, and assign motives they cannot possibly know. White is absolutely entitled to reject that behavior. Where she miscalculated was collapsing the entire backlash into that category. Some critics probably are trolls. Some probably are acting in bad faith, but some are Fever supporters who simply watched the sequence and thought their coach handled it poorly. When you treat those groups as one giant hostile mob, reasonable fans hear themselves being lumped in with the worst people online. That is how a coach accidentally turns criticism into resentment. And here's the payoff to the question we opened earlier. Why has this exploded beyond the original foul? Because the argument is no longer about what happened to Sophie Cunningham. It's about whether Stephanie White understands the audience she's speaking to, and whether that audience still trusts her. That's a much larger problem.
Good. The Indiana Fever put up this post about Caitlin Clark's 29th double-double. And here we are. Fire Stephanie White. Your coach lied to everybody, caught in 4K. Issue an honest, humble apology or go to hell. Quote, I didn't see it.
Look at what happened next. The Fever posted about Caitlin Clark's 29th double-double, something that ordinarily should have produced basketball conversation. Instead, according to the reaction highlighted here, replies were filled with demands to fire White and accusations that she had been dishonest. That tells you controversy has escaped its original container. When a completely separate team post becomes another referendum on the head coach, the communications crisis is contaminating normal business. The organization can try to move forward with highlights, statistics, promotions, and upcoming games, but fans can keep dragging the unresolved issue underneath everything they post. And for a franchise benefiting from extraordinary attention, fan trust carries real value. Ticket buyers matter. Television viewers matter. Merchandise buyers matter. Sponsors care about audience passion. None of that means fans should dictate personnel decisions through social media outrage. Organizations that operate entirely by mob demand become dysfunctional very quickly. But dismissing customers is equally foolish. Professional sports is unusual because emotional investment is the product. A fan isn't purchasing only 90 minutes or 2 hours of basketball. They're purchasing identification with the team. They say we won. They buy the jersey. They argue about rotations. They remember slights against players for years. If that fan begins to believe the organization is contemptuous of them, the relationship changes. That doesn't mean the Fever are suddenly going to lose their entire audience. Caitlin Clark alone guarantees enormous interest. It means leadership should recognize what kind of fire they're dealing with before assuming it will disappear on its own.
Stephanie White, I will always lead with love. Love will always win. Literally 3 seconds later, the rest of you can go to hell. Fire this moron. You don't promote nor campaign for. Talking about Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White is a liar. She was watching when Cunningham got clotheslined.
And this is probably the cleanest illustration of why White's wording failed strategically. The internet reduced an entire press conference to a few seconds because those few seconds contained a perfect contradiction. That isn't necessarily fair. It is predictable. Public figures do not get to choose which 15 seconds become the clip everybody sees. That's especially true when coaching Caitlin Clark's team. The Fever operate in a media environment where every controversial sentence can reach millions of people who never watched the full press conference. White's responsibility, then, isn't to surrender to every critic. It's to communicate in a way that cannot be so easily detached from the point she intended to make. This is why coaches usually rely on boring phrases when controversy hits. We're reviewing it. We support our players. The league will handle discipline. Our focus is the next game. Those answers frustrate reporters because they produce weak headlines, but they survive scrutiny. White chose the emotional answer, and the emotional answer became the story. There is another question hiding underneath all of this. What exactly do Fever fans want her to do now? An apology would satisfy some people. Others would interpret it as forced damage control. A stronger statement supporting Cunningham might help, but if it arrives days after the incident, critics will ask why it took so long. Silence could allow the controversy to cool, but it could also reinforce the perception that she refuses to address the specific complaint. There isn't an easy option anymore because the easiest options existed before the backlash exploded. That's why good crisis communication happens early.
The WNBA is not backing up the Indiana Fever either. Well, let's keep it real. The Indiana Fever coach is not backing up the Indiana Fever. We're expecting the league to. The coach won't.
That line is brutal because it captures the fan expectation at the center of this entire dispute. Why should supporters expect the league to protect Indiana's players if they don't believe Indiana's own coach is doing it? Now, protecting your players has limits. A coach shouldn't automatically accuse opponents of intentionally trying to injure somebody. That's irresponsible without evidence. A coach shouldn't demand maximum punishment after every physical play. Basketball is physical. Players collide. Officials review contact. Leagues issue discipline. But protecting your players can be as simple as making your priorities unmistakable. You can say the contact concerned you. You can say you're glad your player is okay. You can say you'll let the league determine whether additional punishment is appropriate. That is not inflammatory. It is basic leadership messaging. The reason this controversy has become such a referendum on White is that her critics believe they heard more urgency when she defended herself from online criticism than when they wanted urgency about Cunningham. Whether that perception is completely fair almost becomes secondary once enough supporters believe it. And now we reach the larger organizational decision. The Fever should not fire Stephanie White simply because a hashtag gets loud. Coaching decisions should involve player relationships, tactical performance, locker room trust, development, postseason expectations, and whether leadership believes she can effectively manage this roster. But they also should not pretend communication doesn't matter. This is not a small market team operating outside the spotlight anymore. Every coach who takes this job is accepting one of the hottest seats in women's basketball because everything around Caitlin Clark becomes national conversation. The standard is different because the attention is different. The most important question for the Fever isn't whether White annoyed people for 24 hours. It's whether this is an isolated communication failure or evidence of a deeper disconnect between the coach and the audience surrounding the franchise. If it's isolated, you correct it. If it's a pattern, leadership has a real problem.
This league is never going to be able to take substantial real steps forward if they don't get out of the politics business and the social business and the inclusion business. So much for being, this is a league of inclusion. Isn't that what Stephanie White said? I could have swore she said that like 3 weeks ago. This is a league of inclusion. Of course, she told everybody to get out then. We don't want you if you don't support that.
This is also where some critics broaden the argument into whether the WNBA spends too much energy on social and political messaging instead of basketball. That debate has existed around the league for years, and people are going to approach it from completely different perspectives. Some fans believe athlete activism is part of sports culture and always has been. Others want the product centered almost exclusively on competition. But whichever side you're on, there is one practical lesson for the Fever. Don't create unnecessary conflicts with people who came to watch basketball. You cannot demand that every fan share every player's politics. You cannot demand that every player stay silent on issues important to them either. A successful sports organization has to hold both realities at the same time. The bridge is the game. That's the common ground. Cunningham competing, Clark creating, Kelsey Mitchell scoring, Aaliyah Boston battling inside. Winning basketball gives everybody something to rally around regardless of whatever they think about the cultural argument of the week. When coaches become the center of the controversy, that bridge gets weaker. White now has to reverse that dynamic, not by groveling to anonymous accounts, not by pretending she has no principles, by making the basketball and the players bigger than herself again. Because the best way for a coach to escape a media firestorm is usually boring. Communicate clearly, protect the locker room, win games, and stop giving critics new clips.
The Indiana Fever coach told fans to go to hell. And the Indiana Fever have not fired her. And the team president thinks it's okay. That's some kind of a professional sports organization. Wow. Just think about that a minute. Just think it. Told the paying customer, go to hell.
And that brings us back to the paying customer. Sports organizations sometimes forget how unusual that relationship is. Fans willingly hand over money to care deeply about something they cannot control. They travel. They wait in lines. They spend on parking, food, tickets, subscriptions, and merchandise. In return, they expect the team to compete and at minimum not treat their investment with contempt. White may argue that her go-to-hell remark was directed at a specific group of people behaving badly rather than every Fever supporter. That's an important distinction if that's what she meant. But language this broad was always going to be heard more broadly than intended. That is the communications mistake. The outrage afterward was not difficult to predict because the line handed critics exactly what they needed. Suddenly the conversation wasn't, did Stephanie White adequately support Sophie Cunningham? It became, why is the Indiana Fever head coach telling people who criticize her to go to hell? Once that became the question, everything else got buried.
Oh, and they just thought she got booed. I don't know what she was thinking. Thinking that that was going to go over. As soon as she said, go to hell, I immediately went, oh, she's going to get disintegrated tomorrow.
And that's the real reason this story matters beyond one bad quote. Stephanie White didn't create every grievance surrounding the Fever. She didn't create the league's culture wars. She didn't create social media outrage. And she certainly isn't responsible for every ugly thing strangers say online. But she is responsible for her own words. The smart move now is not to fight every account posting a screenshot. It's not to debate whether each boo came from a legitimate supporter or an online activist. It's not to chase every interpretation of the play. It's to recognize that her message failed. A coach can insist she meant to advocate compassion while still admitting that the way she delivered it undermined the point. Those two ideas can exist together. In fact, acknowledging that would probably disarm more criticism than another defensive press conference ever could. Then the basketball has to take over, because ultimately Stephanie White's future should be judged on whether this team believes in her, whether the Fever win, whether players develop, whether she handles the enormous spotlight professionally, and whether management thinks she can lead a franchise carrying expectations unlike almost anything else in the WNBA. But if the question is simply whether this particular press conference helped her, the answer is obvious. It didn't. So now Fever fans have a choice to make. Was this one emotional mistake that Stephanie White should acknowledge and move past? Or did this controversy expose a deeper leadership problem that Indiana can no longer ignore? Pick your side in the comments. And if you want more WNBA breakdowns without pretending the uncomfortable parts didn't happen, like the video and subscribe.